Right. Welcome, everyone. Hello. We're so glad you're here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your current time zone from where you're Zooming and joining us. We're so glad you're here. Thank you so much for signing on. This is the Hamilton College Essay Tips Workshop. So we're so excited to get to tell you a little bit about application essays, provide you with some tips, some things to think about as you are all drafting and working on those application essays. We'll start with some introductions. I'm Niki Barron. I'm an Associate Dean of Admission. I'm also a Hamilton alum. I graduated from Hamilton in 2002. I've worked in admissions since my graduation in 2002, so I have read about 20 years worth of application essays. So why don't I turn it over to Anna?
Hello. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We're so glad to have you here with us. My name is Anna Wise. I'm one of the Associate Deans of Admission here at Hamilton as well. I have been reading application essays for the past decade or so, with the past 3 years being at Hamilton. I'm so glad to be with you here this evening or morning, depending on where in the world you are. And I'd love to turn over to my colleague, Ben.
Hello, everyone. Let me echo my colleagues. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Ben Rose. I'm an Associate Dean of Admission at Hamilton. I have been working in Hamilton since I graduated in 2009. So like Niki, I am an alum. So I have been reading college essays for a little more than a decade myself.
Terrific. So that's who we are. We'd love to know who all of you are. So if you are able to introduce yourselves with your location of where you are Zooming in from, it'd be great to see where all of you are from. If you want to pop that information into the chat, that'd be great. But just to get started, we are really excited to get to talk about application essays. Some of this information will be Hamilton specific, but we're really also trying to make it broad about all of application essays as you're applying to college. We'll answer some common questions about college essays. Our advice is simply our advice. Evaluating essays is truly subjective, and so there are many right ways to craft an essay. You have all got a great essay in you. We read them and we really care about getting to know you. So in our session today, we are going to talk a little bit about how an essay fits in with the overall application. What is the purpose of the essay? What are we looking for? We'll talk a little bit about how to pick a topic, how to think about ways to make your essay stand out. We'll also give you some examples of essays that have been memorable to all of us over the years of reading essays. We'll also provide you with some do's and don'ts of things to think about as you're working on your essay. So just to get started, how does the essay fit into the overall application? How do we use it? What is the purpose of an application essay? When we talk about an application essay, we're talking about that main essay that is part of the application that you're using to apply to college. You might be using the Common application. You might be using the Coalition application. You might be using the QuestBridge application. You might be using a college or university's specific application form. But we're talking about that main essay. This is an opportunity for us to really hear your voice, things that are important to you. We are not mind readers. So if you want us to know something, you need to tell us. And that's why we really value the essay in the process. It's a place to really write things about yourself in your essay, in your application. It's a way to bring your application to life. Tell your story. Let us get to know you. And this is really a chance for us to hear directly from you. It's actually one of the few places in an application when we are hearing directly from the student and hearing things that are important to the student and hearing the student's voice. You're also certainly welcome to use the additional information section of the application to be able to provide additional context, additional information that might not otherwise have a place in the application. So if the application isn't asking for information that you think is important for an admission committee to take into consideration, you're welcome to put all of that information into the additional information section of the application. You'll also find now that the application does have a specific option for students to provide information specifically about the COVID-19 pandemic. You can talk about the ways that the pandemic has impacted you and impacted your high school experience. We know it's been a big part of your high school experience. And you'll find that the application actually gives you a space to be able to address how the pandemic has impacted you and your high school experience. You're also certainly welcome to email information directly to a college that is specific to that college. So remember that if you're applying using the Common Application, the Coalition Application, or the QuestBridge application, multiple colleges are going to read the same essay. So if you're looking to personalize information specifically to a college or a university that you are applying to, you're welcome to follow up your application with a specific email, and that would be added to your application file. Context matters in our application review process. The application essay is one part of many that we consider in our application review process. So it is not like we're zeroing in just on your essay and making a decision just based on that. But your essay really does give us more of a sense of who you are as an individual, which is what we're really trying to do in our application process. Also remember that humans read your essay. Ben, Anna, and I are all on the other end of that submit button. When you hit submit on your application, the three of us, in addition to the rest of our colleagues in the admission office at Hamilton and all admission committees that you are applying to, are all truly reading your application. So it's truly human beings. This is a very human process. We know that there's a human who has hit that submit button. Also know that there is a human who is submitting that or is hitting that release button when we release all of our admission decisions to all of our applicants. So Anna, I'd love to turn it over to you. Can you talk about maybe what we're looking for in an application essay?
Absolutely. So I think the talk about humanity is really important at the core of what we're talking about here, right? As well as the fact that everyone's essay is different and everyone has a great essay within them. Oftentimes people will ask me, what do admission officers want to see from a college application essay? And honestly, it's a tricky question to answer because in our office, as Niki said, there's going to be a lot of humans that are going to be involved in making admissions decisions. We make admissions decisions from committees. So some of your essays may be read by up to 11 or even 12 different admission officers. And these are people that maybe you haven't met yet, right? So if you try and say, how do I appeal to 12 people that I've never met before? It's going to be a pretty tricky thing to get 12 people you never met before to say, this is the type of essay I want, or to agree on anything, really, as everyone has opinions. And being human beings, we all have different types of opinions and things we like to see. Now, if you multiply that by any other types of colleges or universities that you're applying to, and we know most students are applying to more than one college, suddenly you're trying to make 40, 50, 100 people agree on what they want to see in an essay. It's a really hard thing to do. So rather than saying, what do admission officers want to see? I like to talk to students about, what do you want to share? Right? So every person has a different type of life experience and a different story that's important to them. So part of your process of applying to colleges and really deciding what types of colleges you want to apply for is a self-reflective process, right? What am I excited about? What am I passionate about? What do I want from a college experience? And then also, what I want this college to know about me. If I can't necessarily appeal automatically to 100 different people and their interests, all I can really do is be authentic to who I am and say what it is that I want to share. So it's really an opportunity for you to bring your application to life. Now, we're going to have a lot of different aspects when we read your essay. We're not going to read it just alone. We're also going to see your extracurricular activities. We're going to see your letters of recommendation, of course, your academic works and other types of areas of your application. So we're really trying to get to know you on a personal basis as well as an academic basis. We want to know something about you, what's unique to you, what's important to who you are. So your essay is an opportunity to talk to us directly and tell us something, hey, this is something that's unique about me and something that I want you to know about me, potentially as you envision me as a member of Hamilton's student community. So with that said, it's really important to try and be genuine to who you are and also to your voice as well. So oftentimes, like, it's not that we're saying you have to write your essay without any kind of help. Like, you want to get help from like parents and people like that, and reading drafts aloud is a good idea. But we can usually tell if you've worked with an adult or had somebody really revise your essay and it stops sounding like you, right? So remember, when we read our application, we read thousands of essays every year. So we know pretty well what a 17 to 19-year-old sounds like. So if you're using words like plethora or myriad, right? I haven't yet, that's the very rare 18-year-old who uses plethora in everyday conversations. So what I would say is try and be genuine and authentic to your voice. And if it sounds like your essay was written like an 18-year-old, remember, you were an 18-year-old, that's totally fine. What we're trying to do is we're trying to learn something about you specifically. So try and be genuine to who you are. Now, as part of that also, Of course, you want to make sure that you're being as close as possible to being grammatically correct. You're thinking about the clarity of the words you're using. You're also trying to make sure that you're not using fancy words like thesaurus, like plethora, or things like that. So grammar and continuity, these types of things very much matter. But at the end of the day, what we want from the essay is to learn something about you we don't see elsewhere in your application, and we don't learn from your transcripts or even from your letters of recommendation, because we're trying to get to know you on a personal basis as we're learning from you. What type of a community member would you be if we brought you here to campus? So with that said, grammar and things like this are really important, but really what's mostly important is to think about your tone and voice and being authentic to who you are. Since you can't appeal to 100 people you've never met before, all you can really do is try and be genuine to who you are, be self-reflective and say, what do I want these admission officers to know about me? And then trust that when we read your application and we read your the entirety of your application, we'll be able to get that message through. But of course, sometimes it can be helpful and say, okay, well, how do I start by picking a topic as well? So I know that's something that causes a lot of stress and anxiety for students. So I wonder, Ben, can you talk to us a little bit about advice? How would students go about navigating picking a topic? They really have a blank page in front of them.
Yeah, picking a topic is kind of the first big decision you have to make when you're writing your essay. And we'll start with a few things like just things to keep in mind. First of all, you can get very personal in your personal essay, right? You can tell us about things that are really, really deep, really difficult, and really emotionally challenging for you to write about if you would like to. But always remember that you're writing to a stranger in a professional environment. So just keep in mind, like, what you're sharing should be kept in on that level, right? It should be something that you're comfortable sharing with a stranger in a professional environment. And on that same note, right? So when I say it's a personal essay, it should be personal, right? It should be about you in a way that it couldn't be about someone else. A good example for this is I'll read a certain number of essays each year about athletics, and they'll talk about the experience of winning or losing the big game, right? And that's a common essay topic, but it's also a very common experience, right? Like 90% of people who've ever played a sport could write an essay about that. And so if you can replace your name in the essay with someone else's and the essay kind of works, it's not a very personal essay. It might still be well written, it might still be genuine, but it's not very unique to you, right? It's not very personal. So try and pick something that will be personal, something that couldn't be about someone else in the same way that it's about you. And remember that one of the hardest times to try and come up with what you're going to write your essay about is when you're sitting down trying to write your essay, right? So it can be very helpful to think about this sort of thing ahead of time. Jot down ideas. Don't expect yourself to just be able to sit in front of the screen and suddenly be like, aha, this is what I'm going to do. Give yourself some time, some energy to just think about it over a period of time. Keep a list of things that strike you, things that you're like, oh, that might be interesting to write about. It's sometimes the little things, right? The things that you don't necessarily think are, oh, that's an obvious choice, that make the best essays. Keep in mind that the things that make you better at writing an essay are reading, right? Read widely, read the things for your classes in school, read for fun, read things on the internet, right? Like, read and take note of the things that you're responding to. Like, what are the things that strike you in the things that you read, and take that as sort of like an inspiration of what sorts of things you might want to write about. What sorts of things do you want to draw our attention to and have us respond to? And as much as people will talk about topics you should avoid or topics that are bad, right? Remember that there's no such thing as just a universally bad topic. A lot of it comes down to execution. And it's really about how you're presenting whatever it is that you're presenting, as opposed to the topic itself just like shoehorning you into a corner. That said, there are topics that are used pretty frequently, or topics that I think are more difficult to do well. But that doesn't mean you have to avoid them if you've got a really great idea or it's something you really want to write about. Some examples here, writing about adversity. We talked about this earlier a little bit. Remember that when you're talking about like really deep events, things that were traumatic, things that have shaped you, you've only got 650 words to do this. So if there's context that you need to include for us to be able to understand that and really to do justice to the topic, then maybe that's something you want to pass to us outside of the personal essay, right? Maybe that's something you want to send us separately, so you can really make sure you're giving out the space that it needs. if you do want to write about that, if you think you can accomplish it, remember that we're looking for what have you how have you developed out of this, right? We don't want to know just that a thing happened to you. We want to know how it's impacted you. How have you grown? How have you changed? What have you learned from these things that you've experienced? Writing about an activity as a topic is another one that we see a lot. I gave the example of athletics a minute ago. Another one would be service opportunities, right? These can be good topics, but again, the trap that people often fall into here is that not making them personal. For athletics, for example, rather than writing about winning or losing the big game, I often like to see students tell me why they play their sport. Why are you so into soccer as opposed to baseball? Like, why is that the one that you've gravitated towards? Because that usually is kind of personal and it tells me something about you. And I learn about what you value and what your interest is in this sport. And it's not something that everybody is going to approach in the same way. You can have good and bad examples of the same essay topic. And that's partly why this is so tricky, right? Because if we could just say, oh, these are good topics, these are bad topics, this would be a lot easier. But it really is something where it can't be boiled down to that. So let's talk a little more about what makes essays good and bad. Niki, I don't know if you want to jump in here.
Sure. So you've heard, I think, a couple of times so far today that essays are personal, that it's a chance to tell your story, let us get to know you. So how do you write an essay that stands out? I think just be yourself. Think about who you are and have that be reflected in your essay. So I would say don't be gimmicky. Don't try too hard to make your essay stand out. Just be authentic to who you are and have your own voice shine through in your writing, in your essay. One tactic that some students think is a way to stand out is to use humor in an essay. I think sometimes humor can be effective in writing an essay, but it can also not come across as funny if you are not a funny individual. So if you do not consider yourself to have a sense of humor, your application essay probably isn't a good place to try to start to have a good sense of humor. I would say just be yourself. If you are a funny person and humor comes naturally to you, go ahead and use humor in your essay. If it doesn't come naturally, it's okay to not have a funny essay. I think sincerity and authenticity are really the ways that students stand out the most in their essays. Clean and simple writing is better than trying too hard. Anna gave you a couple of examples of words to maybe think about making it sound like it's a teenager voice who wrote this essay. So I think not trying too hard, but just being yourself. And sometimes this really comes more with the refining process, the revising, and the editing process of your essay. Sometimes twists in an essay can be a really fun tactic to have your essay stand out. So if we're reading an essay and we have an idea of perhaps where the essay is going, but all of a sudden you give us a completely different direction. That can be another way to stand out in your essay, to give an unexpected direction or an unexpected twist to the story that you're telling in your essay. Another way perhaps to think about having your essay be more memorable is to think about a good opening. We're about to give you a couple of examples of good opening sentences that we've read over the years, but sometimes a good opening draws your reader in really quickly and gets us really excited to keep on reading your essay, to learn more about where your essay is headed and to learn more about the story that you're telling in your essay. I think also sometimes essays that talk more broadly about a student's childhood are sometimes not as effective as just giving us one specific experience, one moment in time to demonstrate who you are as an individual. I think sometimes the risk that you run in talking broadly about your childhood is that we're not getting as many specific details about who you are as an individual. It can also be tricky. Remember that you're writing an essay as a current senior in high school applying to college. We know that we are admitting students to come as first-year students or in some cases transfer students. But if you're talking about an experience that happened a very long time ago, remember to tie that into how it shaped you as an individual and contributed to your growth into who you are as a person in this particular moment in time as you are applying to college, so that we know who you are now and what your contribution could be to our campus community in that growth that you've experienced now. Anna, would you like to share an example of an opening sentence? I think Ben and Anna, you both have examples, but Anna, would you like to start with an example of an opening sentence of an essay that we've read over the years?
Absolutely. I think when talking about opening sentences, it's important to realize, of course, we're going to read everyone's application essays in their entirety, right? So rest assured, even if you feel like I'm nervous about my opening sentence, we are going to read the whole essay regardless. But if you can do an opening sentence that's really engaging, that paints a scene, paints a picture, also focuses on you, because remember that at the end of the day, what we really want to know is something about you as we're trying to get to know you as a member of our community. Then that can be a really, really great way to pull your reader in and to really engage us in the topic and really stand out. So I did pull a opening sentence that I thought was pretty interesting that I'd like to share with you all. Let me read it because my memory it's pretty good, but not that great necessarily. All right. So it goes, when I was still small enough to fit in the sun-drenched space between the armoire and the couch, I sat cross-legged and spun the world. And so what I like about this sentence, not only does it paint an image, right? So we can see the sun-drenched space between the armoire and couch. We all probably have memories of being, little people and having places in our house where we used to go and sit and snuggle. So you can see that picture, but it also focuses immediately on the student in person. And so now I want to know what does spinning the world mean to this person, and where are they going to go, and how are they going to connect this back to a person who's likely not going to fit in the space beneath the armoire as well nowadays. But it leaves me with not only an image, but also focusing on the student. So I can really know that I'm going to learn something about this person, and I have questions. I want to know, where is this essay going to go? So I would say this could be an example of a great entry sentence that really focuses on painting a picture, but also focuses on the individual and makes the reader really want to know more. So that was the example I picked. Ben, I wonder if you can share your example with us as well.
Yeah, sure. So I similarly wrote mine down. It's 6:52 a.m. on a frosted over Friday in September, and my dad and I are running late as we wind down our steep hill to school. And again, it's very evocative. There's some nice language in there that really paints a picture, but it also leaves you with a question. Why are they late? What are they running late to? Right? Like it leaves you with some thoughts about like, oh, I want to know what's happening here. What's happening next? What's going on in the background? And it kind of pulls you in. Like Anna said, you don't have to have like a beautiful, poignant, perfect sentence for your first sentence. But they set the tone for the essay, right? They help draw the reader into the world. And so they're a good way to kind of start getting yourself into your own essay.
Great. So I think also we have thought more generally about, over the years that we've been reading application essays, what are some of the essays that stand out to us about memorable topics? I think as Ben mentioned, I think just coming up with that topic is sometimes the most challenging part of writing the essay. I think looking at that blank page and wondering where to go from there. And I think as I think back to all the essays that I've read, I think the more memorable essays for me, the ones that stand out, are oftentimes the ones about the more ordinary topics. I think sometimes students get tripped up on needing to find the most original topic, but I actually think that the essays that are about the more ordinary, everyday things that happen in a student's life are, for me, the essays that stand out, because it's the way that students are able to be self-reflective and so insightful about who they are about these ordinary topics that I get a really good sense of who a student is. So one example over the years is that I remember reading an essay about a student's commute to school. And you would think that commuting to school is an ordinary occurrence. Everybody commutes to school, however they do that, whether it's on foot or by public transportation or by personal vehicle. But the way the student wrote about her commute was really memorable, because she talked about how she walks to school every day. And in her essay, she described her community. So she talked about where she's grown up. She talked about what she thinks about as she prepares for her school day. And then she also talked about her return commute home. So she also talked again about, it was an interesting twist on describing the perspective of her home neighborhood that she has when walking in reverse, and also how she processes and digests everything that happened to her during her school day at school. And as she gets ready for the rest of her afternoon and evening at home, doing homework and doing other activities and spending time with her family. I got such a sense of who this student is. She really put herself into her essay. She told the story of her commute to school, but she used that as a framework to really reflect on who she is as an individual. I got such a good sense of how she thinks. I got a sense of where she's grown up, and I got a good sense of how she would then process everything that might happen to her on a daily basis during her time on a college campus. So it was a really well done essay. Anna, do you have an example to share too?
Absolutely. So while I'm so privileged to be able to read essays from students from all different types of backgrounds, one of the populations that I do work with especially are some of our international applicants. So I get to read a lot of students who talk about all different types of topics, and it's really fascinating because I'm always learn something all the time. But one of the essays I remember recently was about a student who was actually born as an infant in the United States and then moved to Nepal when they were very young, so really a toddler. And just it started by talking about issues of identity, saying, I feel like I'm across different cultures, and where do I really belong when I have these two very different types of cultures? And then how scary it was earlier in the pandemic, of course, when there was a lot of time at home, but then finding the opportunity to connect with her grandmother, actually in the kitchen during the pandemic, and really getting involved with cooking traditional Nepali dishes, and then being able to bring in American cultural twists within the cooking kitchen as well, which she then talked about different types of dishes she was able to work on with her grandma, and described changes that she was able to make, and ways she was able to bring different parts of her identity, things that were really important to her, things that mattered to her, together in something as nourishing and comforting and warm and important as food, and also connections with family. So I feel like I learned a lot about her and her own identity journey towards who she is and who she wants to be. And then she ended her essay by talking about how she was excited to go even further and return to the country from which she was born for studying, but bring some of that passion for her Nepali culture with her, and excitement for sharing on our campus and our community as well. And I think it showed a really great opportunity for a young person to connect different parts of themselves, and things that can sometimes be hard and complicated to find yourself when you have such different cultural contexts and experiences, and to say, hey, I can meld these two because I'm an individual and these are both part of who I am, and putting them together in a way that's so meaningful and important, and also sounds delicious. So it does make me hungry sometimes. It's a little bit of a tricky thing there as well. But I really appreciated that, because again, it's a simple topic about a new hobby that the student was able to pick up during pandemic, and connecting also with her grandmother, but also finding more about herself and her cultural identity, community engagement, and what she has to share with the world. So I thought it was lovely in that way, and also hungry for sure. But with that said, that's my example. Ben, how about you?
Sure. My favorite essay, honestly, at this point, I might have read 10 years ago, which tells you how long it stuck with me. It was all about the applicant's hair. And she was talking about how her hair was crazy and frizzy and ruined her life, and she lost friends because she was always late to things, and like how she grew up hating her hair so much, and how eventually she kind of came to make peace with it, and like being like, no, this is a part of who I am. And honestly, like somewhat just being like, I have to deal with this, right? Like I can't pretend that I'm any different than I am. I just have to accommodate who I am, and work with it, and be like, yeah, I'm proud of my hair. I like that it is the way it is. And I just got a really good sense of what she was like from that essay. Again, one of the things you might have noticed is that that's not a terribly deep topic, right? It feels very small on the surface of it, just talking about the applicant's hair. But again, I got a very good sense what she was like through the prism of how she had developed her relationship with her hair over the years, and how she had kind of evolved in her thinking about it. And at the end of the day, again, that's what we want. We want the authenticity. We want to get a better sense of the person whose application we're reading.
So we kind of talked about a bunch of different topic ideas, and we've also talked about the fact that even some areas that people might historically say, oh, not a good topic to discuss. Really, everything is subjective, and everything is how do you present it, and why is that the topic you think is important for you? Now, with that said, we also do want to talk about a couple of topics that we read quite a bit, and talk about ways that maybe if you're thinking about writing about this, realize that it's not saying don't write about this. Just try and be thoughtful and say, what is this going to be telling us about you as an individual on our campus, and try and make it unique to yourself. An example that I use, because I think Ben was talking earlier about how do you make sure that your essay sounds like you. Example I sometimes use is like, imagine that for a moment that you left your essay in a hallway without your name attached to it. Of course, you would never do that. That's like so irresponsible. You'd never do that. But if you left your essay in a hallway without your name on it and your friends came across it, would they know whose essay this is, right? If so, then don't worry if the topic is supposed to be generic or those types of things. You're doing a great job representing yourself as an individual. But if not, then maybe think to yourself, okay, how do I make this more about me specifically? And Ben's already shared a couple of these examples before, things like athletics, hobbies, and service. Another thing to think about if you want to talk about ways you spend your time outside of class. So when you're not in the classroom, what's important to you, whether it's athletics or hobbies or service. Realize also that we are going to read your extracurricular activity section also, right? So if you're telling us about your great hobbies and your extracurriculars in that section, you don't necessarily need to tell us the same thing again in your essay, because we see it already over here. So the essay can be an opportunity to tell us something else that we can't see from other areas. But if you are, as Ben said, if you're going to be talking about the big game, maybe try and make it specific and let us know why is that this is something that's really important to you when you're doing extracurricular activities. If you're involved with service, what is meaningful about it? And what brought you to that issue, and how have you grown in your service over time? So instead of just telling us like things that you've already done, remember we have your extracurricular activity section also, and we're going to read that also. So it's a great opportunity to give us some new information. Now, sometimes people will write an essay about somebody who inspires them, maybe about like their life's history, their hero, or maybe even about your mother or like a relative that's really inspirational to you. And these can be good topics for essays, but the issue is when you write your essay and it's really about your mom, and it's not necessarily about you. Right. So remember that at the end of the day, even as amazing as your mother is, I'm sure my mother's amazing, but like as amazing as your mother is, Hamilton is not going to probably be admitting your mom, right? We're going to have you, hopefully, as a member of our community, not your mom. So if you're going to write about somebody in your life who's important to you, make sure you're not writing about them. You're writing about what do they mean to you, and why has this impacted you? Because at the end of the day, your mom is probably a wonderful person, but Hamilton is mostly interested in learning about you, since you are the one who might potentially be a member of our community. And finally, sometimes people will try and do a lot in an essay, right? We had a question somebody submitted to our host and panelists just now saying, should you use all 650 words, right? So it's debatable how long your essay has to be. It doesn't have to be all 650 words, but sometimes people will see this 650 words and they'll try and put 8 different topics together, right? And be like, I have so much about me. There's so much going on. I need to tell you everything. Realize that if you do that, you're not going to give any one aspect of you really the space that you need to be able to do yourself justice, right? It's like, I think Niki was saying earlier, which is if you're talking about your childhood in totality, right? Your childhood has been a long time. You have 650 words. It's going to be really hard to encapsulate all of that in 650 words. And so in the same way, if you're trying to talk about 8 different things in one essay, you only have 650 words. Realize that. So sometimes narrowing the scope and talking about one specific area, but giving yourself that space to breathe, and also to say, why is this something that's important to you? And make sure that it's active and it's helping us understand something about how you think, what you care about. And look, again, we want to know what type of a community member would you be on our campus at the end of the day. So whichever topic you write about, make sure that you're giving yourself a narrow enough focus, you're giving yourself the space, and it's about you, right? And you're sharing something that is not necessarily reflected elsewhere in your application at the same time. And with that said, I think we're going to move into some do's and don'ts, which is going to hopefully be helpful. And Niki is going to start us off on that.
Sure. So we are going to, actually, I'm going to share my screen here. We have a number of slides available to give you some do's and don'ts and some things to think about as you are working on your essays. So hopefully you can all see this on the screen. So we've talked about many of these things, but do remember to write about your interests. Remember that this is a personal essay. So these should be interests that are important to you, the experiences that you've had, the things that you want to tell the admission committee so that we can keep these things in mind as we are reviewing your application.
Don't try to be what you think we want. We've talked about authenticity a lot, but it's really important. People try to game the essay sometimes, I think. They're like, well, if I just say this secret passcode, then I get into college. And it's really not about that. It's just about us trying to hear your voice. And so don't try to be anything in particular in your essay, just communicate about yourself.
Do be appropriate and remember your audience. And this means remember that the people who you're writing for are admission officers, people you don't necessarily know, but people who want to get to know you better, and people you should kind of be respectful to also. And remember that the purpose of this is really to get to know you as a potential member of our community. So make sure that whatever you write about is something that you're comfortable with an admission officer knowing. I also like to say, if you want to know what does that really mean, imagine that you're writing something for like your best friend's mom, right? You want to be respectful in that type of situation, but share something about you that you want the admission office to know.
Don't let it be over edited or lose your voice in the process. So I think we've talked a little bit about how it is a good idea to get an extra set of eyes to take a look at it, help you with the proofreading process. But don't take all those suggestions into consideration in such a way that your essay then stops sounding like you. So if you're going to have a teacher or your counselor or a family member take a look at your essay, remember that this is still supposed to be a reflection of who you are. It should share some personal insight about who you are, be authentic to you, stay true to yourself. So certainly take those suggestions into consideration, but don't use all of them to such the extent that your essay suddenly sounds like it's been written by somebody else, or that it completely changes the message of what you're hoping to deliver in that application essay.
Do tell a story. We talked about this a bit with the nice first sentences, right? That they kind of pull you in. A good story pulls you in. A good story keeps you engaged. A good story makes you want to find out what happens next. And again, this doesn't have to be about anything in particular. It doesn't have to be a theatrical story, right? It can be about small things. But ultimately, you're trying to engage your audience so that we get that sense of you, so that we are invested in what you're telling us. So tell a story.
Don't forget, this is a personal essay, so it's about you. You're going to get a lot of feedback and a lot of advice from a lot of people who will say, write about this, don't write about this. Who's it about? At the end of the day, it's about you, right? So you're going to be the person who's applying to college. You're going to be the person who wants to be considered to be a member of Hamilton's community or another college's community. Remember, it's personal, it's about you.
Do, show rather than tell. That's a really common phrase that you've probably heard from your English teacher in school. It's good to give anecdotes, good to give examples, good to give descriptions because it'll make your essay more engaging. But good to give these specific examples and anecdotes to help show rather than tell what you're trying to say in your application essay.
Don't overuse a thesaurus or be too vague. Ultimately, this is about word choice, right? We talked about using really fancy words earlier, and it is okay to use some of those. Again, if that's authentic to your voice, that's fine. It's probably not going to be every other word though. And again, the other side of that is being too vague, right? Saying we went to the place to do the thing. You know, it's not very evocative. Make sure you're using more precise language to really paint that picture.
So we had a question earlier about childhood also. Can I write about childhood? Yes, but make sure you're relating the essay topic to who you are now, right? If you just explain how you were when you were 9 years old, that's great. A lot has happened since then, right? So make sure that you are relating the essay and topic and helping us understand why is this important to who you are now? Because it's not 9-year-old you who's going to come to our campus. It's going to be you.
Don't be afraid to start over. Again, I think as you are thinking about brainstorming possible topics, if you are writing your essay, if you just don't feel like it's going well, if it's not a reflection of who you are, feel free to just move on and go to a new, fresh blank page and start from scratch. Try a different topic. Another possible tip to think about is maybe think about writing several essays about different topics and see which one you feel is the best reflection of who you are and represents you the best for the admission committee.
Do proofread early, often, and out loud. Editing is an art form more than a science, but if you spend the time to go through your essay several times, and again, especially if you read it out loud to yourself, you can really get a sense of where are the problem areas, right? Where are bits where it doesn't flow, where you used the wrong word, where you could be more precise. And we talked a lot about that authenticity, that voice, right? If you're reading your essay or aloud and you're like, boy, I would never say this, that is maybe a place where you're not being authentic to your voice. Remember, this is a personal essay, not an academic one, right? It should be authentic to you.
Easier said than done, right? Don't procrastinate. It's a thing that stresses a lot of people out. And oftentimes when we get stressed, we tend to procrastinate. But what happens when we procrastinate? Suddenly we run out of time and the computer crashes and you lose the copy of your essay because you didn't back up your drive. Things happen when we procrastinate. So realize that you need to give yourself the space. This is something that's important. Realize also you're not going to do it in a day, right? So maybe make little baby steps. Do first draft and come back and revise because none of us are perfect at our first try. But if you procrastinate to the end, things tend to happen if you procrastinate. So make sure that doesn't happen to you.
And finally, remember that we are on your side. We really look forward to reading your essays. We really look forward and enjoy this part of your application because we get to learn more about you. We get to learn more about who the person is behind the student that we're seeing in other parts of the application. So it really is a personal experience. We know that. We appreciate all the information that you share with us. But remember that we're really supporting you and cheering you on, and we can't wait to read your essays. So we also wanted to let you know that there are a couple of other resources about the application essay available on our website. So if you take a look here, and I think Ben is actually also going to provide you with the link in the Zoom chat here, but this is a website that we have available at Hamilton with some essay tips. This website will give you a lot of the information that we've shared during the Zoom this evening or this morning, this afternoon, during our session today. But this is where you can find it all in one place. The other helpful resource for you is that also on our website, you will actually get to read samples of essays that we have read over the years. You can read the full length essays. We've gotten the permission of the authors of these essays to be able to share them on our website, where you can actually read examples of essays that have stood out to us as memorable over the years as well. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. The last bit of information that we wanted to talk with you about today is about the individual supplemental essays. So you'll find if you are using the coalition application, the common application, or any general application form, you will find that some colleges and universities will also have additional essays that are specifically required by those institutions. Sometimes they're optional, sometimes they're recommended, sometimes they're not available at all, sometimes they're required. Every college definitely has a different process in how they view supplemental essays. But for those places that give you the option to possibly submit a supplemental essay, we also wanted to talk a little bit about that process. Supplemental essays are different from your main personal application essay. Supplemental essays are usually going to be shorter in length than your personal essay, and they may need a different approach. I think supplemental essays need as much care and as much effort in writing these supplemental essays as your main application essay does too. I think it's good that you're thinking about that main application essay now, but also spend some time thinking about your supplemental essays. Do some research, learn about whether colleges are going to ask you to submit a supplemental essay, learn about the different policies of different places. And then make sure that you're leaving yourself enough time to be able to put as much effort in writing these essays in response to the prompts as you are with the main application essay. The supplemental essays will vary from institution to institution, so make sure that you're paying attention to the prompt. You likely will not be able to submit the same response to the supplemental essays to all the institutions that you're applying to. So make sure that you are answering and addressing the question and the prompt that is asked of you. But with that, I think we are coming toward the end of our session today. Ben or Anna, do you have anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap up?
We had a couple of questions about where Hamilton's supplemental essay is. So this is something that's important to know. So Hamilton, once you apply to Hamilton, you will get access to an application portal. Usually about 24 or so hours after you've applied, you'll be able to set up your portal. And that's a website where you'll be able to manage your application to Hamilton. You'll see a couple different checklists, potentially, depending on if you're applying for financial aid. You'll see what's required. You might see your financial aid checklist, and you will also see an optional supplement section. On that supplement section there, you will see Hamilton's supplemental essay prompt. It's optional. Remember, you don't have to do it as part of the process. We'll also give you multiple other ways that you can potentially supplement your essay and help your application and help us get to know you better. Options like doing an interview with us potentially, or also options like doing an art supplement. All of those will be there. We will also email you through the process to make sure you know that there are those availabilities in your application portal after you apply. So that's where that will be located. But I think that was a good question a couple of people wanted to know.
There was also a question about whether pumping yourself up in the essay might come across as bragging. It's okay to brag in your personal essay and in your college application. Trust me, we're not looking for you to be like, too humble about yourself. It's okay to say nice things about yourself and talk about things that you've accomplished. That's absolutely fine. So don't worry about that, right? We're not saying, oh, this person did great things, but they talked about it, right? It's okay to communicate about your successes as much as you communicate about failures in your college application.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Just in closing, we wanted to say that we know that you each here today who have signed in, you each have a really good essay in you. You've got this. We cannot wait to read what you tell us. We cannot wait to read your application. Certainly, we look forward to reading your essays. But good luck to all of you. Feel free to be in touch if you have any other questions. Ben's actually going to put another link to you all in the chat with additional opportunities to connect with us virtually. But thank you again for joining us today. Good luck to all of you. And it was so nice to get to connect with you all virtually.
Have a good night, everyone.